In a video last year I talked about some tips for shooting in a smaller town environment, and I got a really good reception from that, a lot of positive feedback, so I'm going to go ahead and expand on that one today. Just for context, I am currently living in Asheville, North Carolina, which is not a super small town by most definitions, but I am from Denver, which is a city of 2 million people. So coming from Denver to Asheville was a pretty big adjustment for me, and it forced me to learn a lot about kind of making do with what I have and making the best out of a smaller town. The first thing I want to talk about is that there are far fewer things off limits in a small town than there are in a major city. For example, if you are trying to get into a parking garage to go up a few floors and get a vantage point in downtown Denver or whatever major city, there's a good chance that you're going to run into a security guard or an elevator that you can't get into without a code or something like that. In Asheville, I've been able to get to the roof of, I think, every parking garage in the city by just walking up some stairs. So you might have the same experience in that regard. So if you put some time into exploring, you might be able to find unique vantage points like that, or shoot inside of shops or galleries or whatever. My only advice is that if you do go into somebody's business with the intention of taking photos, don't linger there forever. Just, take a shot, look around, and then leave. Don't stand in somebody's store for 20 minutes taking photos. The next tip is to get creative with your framing, and this one is easier said than done. It's going to take some practice. It's going to take you getting out there and shooting and experimenting a lot more. There are ways that you can get creative with your composition and framing to kind of disguise the fact that you're shooting in a much smaller town. But my personal advice is to drop the idea that street photography has to be done with a 24mm or a 35mm lens and invest in something a little bit tighter. Zero in on the subject that's interesting, a piece of graffiti, a reflection in a window, and use those longer, tighter focal lengths to focus on what you want to convey while cutting out what you don't. Just some things to get you started. As far as what to look for subjects that stand out, colors that are out of the ordinary, shadows, lighting that's unique, dirty textured windows, bus stops, things like that. Anything that's out of place, out of ordinary, try to zero in on that and see what happens, see what you walk away with. Tip number 3 is time and place. If you watched the last video, you'll remember that I gave the advice to look online for festivals or farmers markets that will draw a large crowd of people all to one place. That way you know that there will be people out and about in the town and that it won't just be a ghost town when you're trying to take street photos. This tip is kind of in the same vein as that. For example, in Asheville, if I were to go out on a Wednesday at 2 p.m., there's not going to be a whole lot of people. The city's not going to be packed. But if you go out on a Friday night at 5 p.m., just before people are getting to their dinner reservations, you hang around the restaurants, the movie theater, whatever it is, and your chances of getting a good photo or finding an interesting subject are going to increase exponentially. So figure out what time people are going to be out and about in your small town or small city and be there for that. The next tip I have is to revisit old spots or rework old pictures. So head back to places where you've been successful in the past, or better yet, places where you haven't. Now I know it can get boring just walking the same block or walking up and down the same street, but there's almost always more than one way to capture a scene, and if you mix it up with different variables, you'll walk away with much different shots. Different subjects, different time of day, different weather can all make a huge difference, even if you feel like you have exhausted all the potential in a spot. Now before we wrap up the video, I have one last kind of counterintuitive tip. I know that these videos are supposed to be about making the best of what you have, making your small town environment work for you, but there is something to be said for changing up your surroundings, even if it's just for a day or a few hours. So if you have the means and the ability to, try to get out of your town and check out another location. Even if that other place isn't a big city, it can still help change up your surroundings and kind of re-inspire you. Even when you are back to the same streets that you've walked over and over again in your own small town, you have kind of like a renewed, refreshed sensation after doing that. That about wraps this video up. I hope that you found this version even more valuable than the original one. If you do want to watch that original one, you haven't seen it already, I will link it somewhere on the screen here. Thank you as always for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more videos like this one, and I will see you in the next one.